Welcome to The Currency of Grief, the podcast where we confront two of society's most taboo topics, death and money. My name is Justin Weidenfeld, and I'm here to serve as your grief financial officer, guiding you through the complex and emotional journey of what happens when money and mortality collide. Whether you're navigating the aftermath of losing a loved one, looking for practical advice on handling pre- and post-death planning, or simply just wanting to start those hard conversations about legacy while you still can, this space is for you. Together, we'll hear real-life stories from real-life people who have navigated the intersection of grief and money and come out the other side. Our guests will share their stories, practical insights, valuable advice, and moments of clarity so that none of you have to navigate this alone. I'm grateful you've decided to join us on this journey. Now let's dive in. So without further ado, let's meet our guests for today's podcast. I am humbled and honored to be in the virtual studio with Nikki Sherman. Nikki and I met 2 weekends ago at the Experience Camp's Adult Grief Retreat. Quick plug for the Adult Grief Retreat of Experience Camps. Highly recommended to everybody listening out there. She attended my session about the intersection of grief and money, and she openly shared her story with me. Just as impactfully, though, she beat me in an intense game of wiffle ball, rocking her Boston Red Sox hat the entire time. Nikki is a wife, a mother, a retired clinical specialist in physical therapy. She's also a former expat where she lived in the UK when her husband died. What surprised her most, and what we'll dive into today, is not only the grief that Nikki felt after her husband and best friend died, but also the challenge of working across 2 countries and closing down his life and his estate, including all of the regulations when it came to probate and transferring assets. So without further ado, Nikki, thanks so much for being here on the podcast.
And thank you for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, super excited to have you here today. So quick summary, I sort of posted in our group chat, our WhatsApp chat, promoting the podcast, and I asked if anybody, was willing to share their story on the podcast, and Nikki emailed me. So what made you want to reach out and share your story on the podcast today?
It came about when I came to the kind of breakout session at the camp, Grief and Money, and just hearing other people's stories and realizing I have a lot in common with them, but in that unique situation of not only did I lose my husband and have assets to take care of, but I was doing it across 2 countries, and perhaps there are people who are out there who are struggling with that as well. Not necessarily UK, it could be somewhere else. Also, I find, because there's been that much time now and distance from it, talking about it is therapeutic for me. So it's both for me and for others.
I'm glad that everybody can benefit from this episode then. Both you and me and everybody else who can learn, because your story is so unique, because I feel like we've garnered at the Currency of Grief have garnered the audience of people who are dealing with or have dealt with probate and life insurance and settling an estate. But not a lot of people have had to do it across 2 countries, especially during a global pandemic. So, that's just a cue into your story. Nikki, as you know, as being a listener, on the Currency of Grief, we don't hold back, we dive right in. And so tell us a little bit about your grief story.
Okay, well, I'll start with talking about Scott. His name was Scott. He died when he was 52 years old. I met Scott at Boston University, end of my freshman year, end of his sophomore year. So, I was 19, he was going on 21. We were together for all of our adult lives. He was 52 and he died. I was 50. In fact, I just turned 50. So we just were each other's best friends. There was always Nikki and Scott. Our life, kind of our motto was like this: life is an adventure, and let's grab hold of it and do everything that we can. So after we got married, we moved to Austin, Texas for a few years, which was a great time to be in Austin. It was during kind of the tech boom. All these other transplants were there, super fun, about 4 years there. And then we had this opportunity to go and live in the UK with his work. And we said, yeah, why not? So off we went. It was only supposed to be 2 years. That turned into over 20 years. So, because we just were really enjoying it. And then we had our daughter, and then she's in school, and that it just never made sense to come back to America. We both had good jobs, really good friends, and just had created a life there. Just just who Scott was, just a super wonderful, funny, sweet, gorgeous person on the inside and outside. The grief story is, it was a Thursday like any other, 27th of May, 2021. I got up early, took our daughter to early morning practice with some of her friends, came back, put the coffee on, and I knew that Scott had again, it was the end of COVID, everyone's working from home. He had some calls, so he was in the home office, door closed. That's all normal. The door's closed, I could hear him talking. He finished the call, opened the door, and I went in to see, hey, do you want me to make you something for breakfast? He just said, I don't feel well. I really don't feel well. And said, go through everything. Do you have a fever? What doesn't feel well? Have you eaten anything? Have you had anything to drink? He had type 1 diabetes. So I said, how's your blood sugar? He said, blood sugar's fine. It was very well controlled with his diabetes. So I don't know. So I did, what anyone else would do. I'll make you something to eat. So went into the kitchen to just get him a piece of toast or something. And then I heard him fall. And he called out to me. And so I went into the office, and he was on the ground. And he said, I'm scared. I called the ambulance. Thankfully, we lived just around the corner from a community hospital where there was an ambulance station. They were there in seconds. He was still awake. He was talking. We still had no idea what was going on. Another ambulance come. 3 ambulances arrived with full crews, and they were all in there with me. And at that point, I'm backing up, and at that point, just have no idea what's going on. And he was starting to get a bit confused. He was really focused on some big meeting that he had later in the day, and I just kept saying, "It's okay, it's okay. We'll sort out your meeting. It's okay, Scott. It's okay." And then he was sitting up, and they were listening to his lungs, and I saw him take his last breath. They whisked me out of the room. And because I'm a physical therapist, I worked in hospitals, I used to do CPR training. I knew what was going to happen. I also knew very clearly those ambulances are a hospital on wheels. They were wheeling in all the equipment that was needed. They had defibrillators. They had machines that would do CPR. So I knew, okay, they're going to do CPR. They have the defibrillator. He probably had a heart attack. It'll be fine. We've got everything there. And then they said, call some people. Is there anyone you can call? All our family were back in the U.S. It was the middle of the night for them. This was 9:30 in the morning UK time. Called some friends who thankfully were also working from home. They came over. 45 minutes went by. 45 minutes of CPR. 45 minutes of defibrillator. There were no signs of life. That breath I saw him take, that was his last breath. So they stopped. And the strange thing was, because one of the questions you had asked was, did your background help or hurt in some situations? And it helped me to stay calm. It helped me to reason things. I knew what was happening, but it hurt because I also knew what was happening. I knew what 45 minutes of CPR without any signs of life meant. Yeah. It wasn't a heart attack. It was a pulmonary embolism. No amount of CPR was going to bring him back.
And for those who are maybe naive like me, what is a pulmonary embolism? What causes it? And is there
It's a catastrophic blood clot that just shuts everything down. There are
Okay.
blood clots that can ping and can cause a stroke. There are blood clots that can ping and cause a heart attack. This was one that went into the lung, into the main functioning of the heart and the lung. There was no coming back.
Yeah. Wow. Um, no, no easy way to tell the story, but I appreciate you sharing it in that detail with me, with us. Um, Talk a little bit more about your family. What was life like for your family before Scott's death? Um,
Before, like I said, our whole motto was about life being an adventure. So travel was just hugely important to us. I mean, our daughter is now 19 years old. She has been to 4 continents and over 35 countries. That was, and it's not, I'm not saying that to brag, it's just we had these opportunities and we took them. And we would, for us, it was all about, okay, don't spend a ton of money to do this. It's all about the adventure. So rather than say, stay on the hotel that was on the beach, we would stay in the hotel behind that hotel to save some money because it's the same beach. We would take the cheap flights with hand luggage rather than check luggage because it's all about getting to that destination and having that experience.
right. Yeah, and it sounds like being together as a family, as a cohort,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
like
Three
a group.
musketeers.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's really special. And what year did Scott pass?
2021.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
So
it
it's
was literally
five,
right out of COVID.
yeah. Yeah. 5 years
So
ago.
yeah, how did you tell your daughter and like um yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was supposed to be picking her up for a dentist appointment that afternoon. So when it was all happening, I called the school and said, just tell Sophie something's happened and I won't be getting her to the dentist appointment. But little did I know her father wasn't going to recover from this. Um, and so my friends that were there, I just remember just collapsing and just saying, I don't want to tell her. I don't want her innocence to be gone because everything changes. And they're the ones who said, Nick, you have to tell her. You have to tell her. I just don't want to. I don't want to. And so my friend May went to pick her up from school. And she already knew the fact that it wasn't me picking her up. She knew something was wrong and she came in. And I told her and we just hugged and screamed and cried.
hmm.
Yeah.
And given your background working in hospitals and in the medical field, uh, you you wrote on our initial get like podcast guest form that you thought you knew what grief would be like, and then like what surprise like what was it like? How did it
I
shock
mean,
you?
had so many psychology classes, Kubler-Ross and the stages of grief and know all that. But it was the physical pain. I have never hurt. I mentioned it, train wreck, car wreck, being punched repeatedly, anything. It was so physically painful. Everything hurt. It also, I didn't realize tear ducts could produce so many tears. I mean, there was a point I couldn't see anymore. My eyes were so swollen, and yet still tears could produce. And I consider myself a somewhat intelligent, educated person. I couldn't think. Thinking hurt, making, and we'll go into all the decisions. These decisions you're starting to have to make. When I just wanted to crawl into a cave and lick my wounds because everything hurt. I couldn't think. Everything was foggy, and I was severely depressed at that point too.
Right. Um, you brought it up, so I'm gonna go there. What were the immediate action steps that you needed to take, and how did you make those plans, those life decisions when you could, barely think, barely see out of your eyes, barely get out of bed, and the person that you normally talk to through these decisions wasn't there.
Yeah. Um, the Everyone was trying to do their best to help, but I didn't want to arrange funeral services for my husband. That's the last thing in the world I wanted to do. but I was the only one who could do it. So everyone was very gently saying, I think it's time. I think it's time that you do it. Come on, you need to do it. And so it was just having people who can come with me to this horrible visit to a funeral home to talk about things and to choose. I got really obsessed with choosing his casket because I didn't want it to look like a casket. I wanted it to be beautiful in a way. It ended up being English willow and hand woven, and it was strangely beautiful. And everyone had lavender and rosemary because we grew lavender and rosemary in our gardens. Everyone had bundles of that, and everyone put the bundles of lavender and rosemary on the casket. So yeah, it's one of those strange things to be obsessed with, but I just didn't want your classic looking box. And also just how it would look, that it was a celebration of life, not something sad, except for the fact that Scott loved the Smiths, Morrissey and the Smiths. And I mean, that is not upbeat music, but that was kind of the soundtrack of his service, was very much.
That's what he would have wanted to play, or
that's what he would want. And he knew I didn't like the Smiths, not my vibe.
Well, it reminded you of him.
Exactly. Yeah. The other thing was that when your questions had been, what surprised you? It was the fact that everyone assumed we were going to move back to America. That Scott's gone. Obviously, you guys are selling the house. Off you go to America. And that was something I actually really quickly decided, no, that's a bad idea. We'd been there for 20 plus years. This is the only place Sophie knew. We had friends here. We had our home here. If I came back to America, that's her starting a whole new school system. She was in the British school system. No friends here. All of our American friends were all over the place. And I just felt like I would come back to be with my parents and be a burden on them because I was in no state to start new, to start fresh.
Right. Uprooting both of your lives and trying to find a new normal on top of finding a new normal in life, like with grief. That's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. So I decided it was best for us to stay somewhere where it was familiar, where Sophie could stay with her school, and we had that support system of friends around us.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we decided, okay, but we will go back to America when her schooling has ended and it's time for college.
Mm-hmm. So is she going to college in the U.S.?
Yeah. Yeah. And spoiler alert, we have moved back to America. We moved back in August. And she's just started at college here.
Awesome. Yeah. Is she in Boston?
Yes. Yeah.
Very nice. So you mentioned the casket picking out and being obsessed with that process and making sure it was right. And then before that, you mentioned upon vacation, you weren't going to stay in the hotel right by the beach. You're going to stay one back because, it's the same beach and you can just walk there. And so I think a lot of people struggle with this decision of it's going to be in the ground forever. How much should I spend on a casket? Yeah. Or
Justin, not even in the ground forever. It was immediately going to be burned. He was cremated.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was for viewing on 2 occasions. Sophie and I had a private viewing of the casket. I didn't want her to see his body. That is not the lasting memory I wanted for her to see her father like that. But we had a time with the casket, and then at the service, and then it goes into a conveyor belt basically as we all went off to the pub to have drinks and food. And and that is what happened. And one of the strangest things was when, a week later or days later, the funeral home phoned me and said, "We have your husband's remains for you." And I went there and I basically got a shopping bag, like one of those reusable shopping bags with the funeral home's name on it, filled with containers of his ashes. And you don't even know what to do with that emotion because it's just surreal. Like, this isn't happening. This isn't my life. These aren't his remains. This isn't him.
Yeah. When my grandmother was cremated this past year, they called us, like your grandma's ready. And I'm like, okay, like we're gonna go
like
pick up
picking up the
grandma
dry
now.
cleaning. Yeah.
It was super just odd and just felt weird, but I think, you know, laughing and crying and thinking through that process is the only way you can navigate it, is just putting a step one foot in front of the other and just being like rolling with the punches, as you would say.
Yeah. Yeah. And you had mentioned about, or was asking about the cost of it. I don't remember the cost of it. In fact, I had started a whole spreadsheet because that's what I do. I had a whole spreadsheet of all the expenses, both in the UK and the US, but it's gone now. I don't ever want to see it again. Um, but I just remember thinking, God, funerals, they're just like weddings. As soon as you put that label on it, everything's more expensive.
It's true. Yeah, I feel like you somebody's trying to get one over on you,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a wedding photographer is much more expensive than just a normal photographer.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anything regarding a funeral is just more expensive because it's end of life funeral,
Yeah.
and people are willing to spend it because they're at an emotional point. Which
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
is that this? So talk to us about the ceremonies. Was he cremated in the UK? Did you have a ceremony just in the UK, or what happened?
So we had a ceremony in the UK, and then because we already had tickets to fly to America, because as a family, this was going to be our first trip back to America after COVID. So I had to very quickly change those arrangements. And I was kind of mad that the airline didn't just give us an upgrade when I explained, why one of the tickets wasn't going to be used. And we're changing. We were going to go out for 2 months rather than 2 weeks because we just wanted to be with family. So I arranged another service in his hometown in Connecticut that, for his parents' sake and his friends in America, and then a third, much more informal service on the beach in Cape Cod, which is where we spent most of our summers, which is where my parents now live. Um, yes, it's 3 services. The one in the UK, we were very restricted as to the amount of people we could have in it, which was good and bad. Scott and I are very private people, and we didn't want everyone there in what was such a private moment, and especially for Sophie too, being a child. She was 14 at the time. So it was kind of a good thing that it was limited. And same thing in the one in Connecticut, we also were very we decided to be restrictive on the numbers. And then the beach was just our nearest and dearest coming there. But the transportation of the ashes was another thing altogether. The transportation of human remains on an airline. I had told the funeral home that that's what we were going to be doing, was bringing at least some, if not all, of his ashes back. So that first trip back to the US, my carry-on luggage was filled with this container that basically Sophie and I, the plan was we were going to kayak out to our favorite spot on Cape Cod and leave a thing of his ashes there. But it took up my entire carry-on luggage. And they specifically said, put it in your carry-on luggage. You don't want them rifling through that, if it's checked luggage. You put it in your carry-on luggage with the certificate on top. So when they open it, they immediately see the certificate. So they said, it will make the security thing go off. It will. And so sure enough, going through security, it's an emotional time anyway, because we're traveling back to America with Scott is now deceased. And sure enough, my carry-on luggage goes through, and you have to stay there and wait with everyone else. And everyone's looking at you going, ooh, what are they trying to bring in? Did they have liquids or something? Or did they have their nail scissors in there? But thankfully, the security person was excellent. She basically unzipped it, opened it, took one look at the notice, closed it, and said, I'm so sorry, and passed it over.
Yeah. Wow. Um, it's just something you don't think about. I mean, even that's just emotional itself, is flying for the first time without him. Then he's still with you, but he's, the remains. And the last thing you want is everybody looking or, needing another search through the airport.
And then I started thinking, are they going to make me open this thing and see the ashes? I don't need Sophie to see that. I don't want to see it.
Yeah.
But no,
I
they were
think
very good.
it sounds like the funeral home really helped in describing exactly what to do, because most people wouldn't know what to do. And with regards to the multiple services, I woke up the day of my dad's funeral knowing that it was going to be the worst day of my life. And yes, we were surrounded by 400 family and friends. And it was really nice to see people come together for him. But I never wanted to experience that day again in my life. And so, what was your thought process in doing multiple services? Was it really hard, or
It
was
was
it just everybody's opportunity to say goodbye?
it was awful. Part of me wanted to not have services at all, but that wouldn't have been right. There were you kind of can get caught up in your own grief, and I just want to protect Sophie, and I was dealing with so much too. But then you realize, no, other people are mourning too. He meant a lot to a lot of people, and give them the chance also. But one thing I made sure of is that, particularly the one in the U.S., it was the quiz that I put together, going, how well do you know Scott Sherman? And everyone there, I stood up and I emceed this quiz. And one of the questions was, what was Scott's major in college? And his fraternity brothers, best friends, best man at his wedding, they didn't even know what his major
What was
had
his
been in college.
major?
Political science.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
maybe they
Which is,
weren't doing so much studying in college. I
yeah.
That's really funny.
But yeah, it was
Yeah,
about trying to make these horrible things joyful in a celebration.
he was too busy hanging out with you and forging your life together instead of talking about political science.
Exactly.
I love that. After he died and sort of the dust settled, what were some of the first financial tasks and what role did you take on, and then what were some of the first financial tasks and the worries that came up?
My role was everything. Absolutely everything. Yeah, it was my full-time job. There was no one else. Our families were back in America. Our friends were wonderful and supportive, but from a financial aspect, we're very private. I'm not going to share that kind of information, even with close friends. Um, so I very quickly got a lawyer, because I knew I would need help with probate. Um, so I met with her, and she was very helpful with what I need to get started. And I just started just researching, just what are things I need to do. And I already knew the way we kind of organized our lives is that we had two bank accounts, but they were both joint accounts. But I had mine and he had his. I didn't have a bank card in his and he didn't have a bank card on mine. But they're joint accounts. And thank goodness for that. Because out of his account came the mortgage and Sophie's her school fees. And those were huge stresses of mine, going, oh my gosh, we have to be able to pay the mortgage. We have to be able, she needs to be able to stay in her school. But immediately just contact the bank, provide the death certificate, boom. It was in my name. I had access to everything. So that was a relief. And anything that in which my name was on, that would happen. UK probate was actually quite straightforward. It took about 6 to 9 months, as it does, but not too difficult.
What assets were in the UK? Was it, did you have a home in the UK that you owned? Did you have what type of property, and then what property was in the United States?
We had our home in the UK, and thankfully both of our names were on the deed. So again, easy, just change it over to my name. We had one car at that point because we lived really close to London, so we didn't need two cars. Car was in my name. Thank goodness for that. And all the bills also predominantly in my name, even if they came out of his account. So a lot of things were made easier by that fact. And the fact that just as a couple, we just talked about our finances a lot. Nothing was hidden. We both had we're on the same page in terms of our savings and investment goals. I knew where his pensions were, the companies. I will mention his UK work pension. A pension is like a 401k. So when I keep saying pension in the UK, it's the same as a business retirement account.
Yeah. So
His pension was with a company called Scottish Widows. I'm Scott's widow. So every time I got anything from Scottish Widows, this would be the point of the podcast where I would swear, but it just infuriated me that what a stupid name.
yeah, that would piss me off. Just like
Yeah.
all these little jabs, and then on top of it, like just the name of the company. I mean, that's
Yeah.
something hopefully now you can laugh at, but
I can laugh at it's still annoying, but I can laugh at it.
for sure. And so what did Scott do for work?
He worked for a big multinational IT company.
Okay.
His role in that was within financial services for Asia, Middle East, and Africa. So
Okay.
it's quite a global role.
Makes sense. And at this time, were you working?
I was working. I was again. My background is a clinical specialist physical therapist in neuro rehab and complex medical, and I was working as a self-employed case manager in catastrophic injuries.
Okay.
It was kind of in a medical legal world.
Were you in person or remote at this time?
It was a combination.
Yeah.
I would go and see clients to do assessments, but then I would do a lot of things based at home, calls and contacts and videos. But I wasn't delivering direct patient care. It was more coordinating the care that my clients would receive.
Got it. Well, I want to talk about your work in a second, but you mentioned how much you had talked about money. So how prepared were you, and how did you find this estate attorney in the UK, being in a foreign, a relatively foreign country?
Yeah. That was pretty easy. We Americans like to kind of downplay the advances that other countries might have. But the UK, there's free health care. Taxes are relatively easy to do in the UK. It's very user friendly, the way they have it set up. And finding things like they call it a solicitor. Finding the solicitor who could do probate, again, just wasn't that difficult. I could just go online. Because I was working in the medical legal field, I already had relationships with some law firms, so I knew ones that I could trust, and but doing something different than medical legal work.
Makes sense. And so talk about how you talked about money, and I assume, well, you mentioned Scott had a will, and so how recently had you guys drafted that up?
Oh gosh. So when Scott turned 50, I'm almost embarrassed to say it wasn't until he was 50 that we had wills. Because I said, come on, we really should. This is kind of irresponsible of us not to. So we did. We had our wills done, and it was so glad we did, and I'm so glad we included Sophie in the conversation. We would talk and laugh about it, and there's this thing in the wills that because we had to think about mirror wills that basically they were exactly the same, just the wording was different. But it's important if one of the spouses dies to update the will so that if you remarry, all of your assets don't go to the new spouse. And then that then started the conversation of, well, if one of us dies, I told him, I assume you will find someone else because frankly, you can't cope without me. and then I was talking about it, but just to be known that. And I started deeming this person, whoever he was going to marry, I called her that bitch. And I said, that bitch isn't getting any of my stuff. That bitch isn't Sophie's mom.
That's really
so. And so we laughed about that. And then he said, I know you'll find someone else. Yeah, but just fall apart a little bit, maybe. And I think about that. I think about that a lot. And I think I did. God, I did. I fell apart. But I picked myself up, too.
Yeah. I love that. It's the evolution of grief.
Yeah.
And time. So, and were your wills done in the United States or were they done in the UK?
They were done in the UK. And we knew that we had already looked into it, that they would be recognized in the US.
Okay, good.
And they were, which is great.
Yeah. And was there a trust involved or no?
No, there was only be a trust involved if both of us had died, and then a trust would have been set up for Sophie. But even that, having those conversations of, okay, if we both died, Sophie's in the UK, we would eventually want her. It was a whole big conversation of who would be her temporary guardians in the UK, and that eventually she would move to the US and her aunt would be the guardian. So it was a whole kind of series of things. And so that
Right.
after he died, I had to just think about that again, going, okay, now this has happened that one of us has died. What if I die? Do we need to rejig that at all? Because she was still under 18
Right.
at that point,
And
too.
so did you?
Yes. Yeah, I did rejig it ever so slightly.
Yeah.
And she knew, and the whole thing is having that conversation with her. She is aware of everything.
Right. I love that. I'm so glad that you said it, because the documents are documents, but if you're able to include your child, and at the time, she was under the age of 18, and still, like, hey, like, you can still have a conversation about it, and, you know, ideally not speaking into existence, but like have the, a planning conversation to say, hey, God forbid this happens, like, this is what I want to happen, like, does that make sense to you, are you okay with that, instead of leaving them out of the loop, and then your kid, all of a sudden gets something, or is in the care of somebody that they don't want to be in the care of,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
that exaggerates grief to the fullest.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that and stating it the way you did. Um, so, what else? What happened to Scott's pension? So you just called up the company and they gave it to you?
We have to give, so I had to get the UK death certificate, and then I had to get a consular report of a US citizen's death abroad. So that's from the US Embassy. And so I always had to have both of those. And to anyone out there, get as many copies as you can, because you are sending them out left, right, and center, and you don't know which originals you're going to get back, and you need originals. I needed that. I needed, again, her passports, and marriage certificates, because what the question they always asked was, were you still married when he died? But yeah, so he had to have proof that we were still married at the time of death.
Yeah.
Um,
And so were you the beneficiary of his pension, and what was the decision like when everything did transfer over to
yeah.
you?
He had life insurance through his work, which was great, and that's kind of my plug for life insurance. I didn't realize how important life insurance was until losing my husband, because it's immediate. It is the quickest, besides the joint bank accounts, which they were joint, so it immediately became I had access to. But that money from life insurance is tax free in the UK, and I assume here too, is fairly immediate, and that's your mortgage. I paid off the house at that point. I thought, if there's anything I can do, as I can make sure we have a home secured for us. So I paid off the mortgage. Sophie's schooling was sorted now, that I didn't have to worry about that, and I can make that decision about working, because I was no longer mentally able to cope with my work. But with that life insurance, I was able to make the decision that I don't have to go back to work, which was that was a relief. I felt guilty about it, but it was also a relief to be in that position.
Talk more about that. So talk about that really challenging decision of not wanting or being able to really go back to work, because as you mentioned, when I first asked what role did you take on, you were like, well, I already got a full-time job, momming and executoring.
Yeah. Yeah. I felt horrendously guilty. And I remember calling up my manager when Scott died and saying, I'll probably be off for about 6 to 8 weeks. I don't know where that came from. I just had in my mind, because of course you bounce back and go back to work. And I loved my job. I absolutely loved it. I still think about my clients, and I hope that they're okay in their journeys of recovery. But again, what I did was work with people who, when we're talking about grief, they had a different kind of grief. They were grieving the loss of who they were before this horrific accident that happened. My clients were people who had, say, crushing injuries from, a cyclist who's run over by a bus, or a medical malpractice that this baby or child who was supposed to be quote unquote normal now isn't. Um, so those were the clients, and those I loved helping them through their journey of becoming the best that they could possibly be within their level of difficulties. I had nothing left to give them, though. Nothing. I was too wrapped up in my own grief and on supporting Sophie that I could not even fathom doing anything to help anyone else. I couldn't. So although I felt guilty, it was the right decision.
Yeah.
Not to work.
There was somebody at camp at FTA as well who was a hospice worker and lost someone who went through hospice, and they are navigating their own grief. And when you are giving and you have to hold so much of other people's grief and emotions and just trauma and challenging times, and you're going through it yourself, it's really hard. So I give you a lot of credit, and would love to. I think you're a pinnacle of people should potentially take the advice of securing your own mask before helping others, and um and you've gone back to helping others. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, of the people that you're helping now today?
Yeah. So I made that decision not to go back into doing anything related to physical therapy. And one of the reasons, not just the grief, and I cannot take on my clients and patients' grief, but also CPR. I, it's still a trigger for me seeing it even on TV when CPR or defibrillator is being used, because I saw it, and it was very traumatic to witness Scott's death. So I can't at this point in my life go through CPR training again. Perhaps someday I can, but that prohibits me from doing a lot within the medical profession. So I decided, well, what can I do? Well, how about if I give back to organizations that mean a lot to me? What brings me joy? Give back to them. When we were in the UK, I started volunteering for an organization called the National Trust, which maintains kind of these old historic properties and gardens, think like Downton Abbey, those kinds of big places that people can't afford to live in anymore and now donate to National Trust. So I was there. And then since moving back to the US, I now volunteer at the New England Aquarium, which
That's
I
cool.
love. I absolutely love. I'm now penguin certified, if I could.
That's super cool.
But it's cool things like that. And again, I'm giving back, helping to educate other people about conservation and about all the wonderful things about these amazing sea creatures, and a big tourist destination for people coming to Boston. And I volunteer at a couple gardens in Boston too, just making these beautiful public green spaces as beautiful as possible.
That's amazing. That's super cool, and I just see the way you light up when you talk about that work.
Such a nerd.
Transitioning
Yeah.
sort of back to life insurance, everybody's favorite topic.
Yeah.
I mean, I honestly think your story is the reason that people need life insurance, is because it affords you the ability to continue to put a roof over your head, to continue to pay for school, and then also have the flexibility to do the things you want or need to do during this time of grief. And just like, getting your teeth pulled at the dentist, like nobody really wants to have that life insurance conversation, but it's super important. So I have a couple like sort of two rapid fire questions. One was if you feel comfortable sharing around how much life insurance there was, and then tell me about what happened when you received the proceeds, and how did it really feel to have that money now that Scott was gone?
Yeah. I'll start with that one. It feels awful. It's not a good feeling. Not a good feeling at all. I just remember crying and crying, going, this is what his life is worth. There was a monetary value associated with Scott. Someone who is priceless to me. There was a monetary value. I won't get into details. Six figures. So that's what we we're very fortunate in that way. But yeah, it was an awful feeling, and we feel guilty about it, and we feel we have to protect it very much so, but at the same time live our lives and don't make horrendous sacrifices, continue because that's what we would do. We were a family who loves adventure, loves travel, loves to experience things, loves to eat out and try new things. Still do that, but be sensible and respectful. Oh, another plug for life insurance, because it's immediate or fairly immediate, it's very quick. Everything else, probate and all the other assets, took just shy of 3 years to get access to those. So another reason why life insurance is so important, because you get it and you can start paying your bills immediately.
Right. And so, with regards to life insurance, what would you want other people or other widows to know or understand about your experience in inheriting the life insurance proceeds and just putting it in place in the first place?
Yeah. It was one of the first things that I did after Scott died, was make sure that I had life insurance, because now I understood the value of it. And if anything were to happen to me as well, that Sophie would immediately have access, or through the trust, immediately have access to those funds.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, life insurance is supposed to be there to obviously cover the cost of someone's life and allow the flexibility, the opportunity, the, maintaining the same lifestyle for the people that you're leaving behind, whether you're the primary breadwinner, whether you're, a stay-at-home mom, or stay-at-home dad, you are contributing to the overall family unit, and everybody should at least think about what would happen if I were not here, and am I putting my family at a disadvantageous position, or do I want to provide for them even though they're going to be grieving my loss? So, end of the life insurance conversation.
Yes.
You mentioned, so obviously you have a UK lawyer. I
Yeah.
assume you have an American lawyer, and then you mentioned this this last 3 years. So
Yeah.
my question
So
is, it sounds like it probably costs a lot of money to like have a 3-year probate plus multiple lawyers in different countries.
yeah, and the emotional toll of it too, that you just want to put this to rest and to be able to move forward with your life, and yet you're having these constant reminders, constant things pulling you back every time a statement from a financial organization came
From
in.
Scotland Widows came in.
Yeah, from Scottish Widows, like, again. And having to call up these places and saying the same story over again. It's like it's like opening the wound up again, calling because my husband Scott died. When did he die? I'm so sorry. And it's the same conversation every time. And then it's the fact that none of these organizations, none of these financial institutions are unified in what they require for you to transfer assets. Everyone has a different requirement. And that became immensely frustrating. And that was mostly on the American side of things. UK probate wrapped up 6 to 9 months, and we were sorted. So I had that lovely probate document, all signed, sealed, ready to go, because I couldn't even start anything in the US until I had that.
Oh, really? So you had to finish the UK probate first before starting the US probate.
Exactly. Because part of that probate is the UK, what's called HMRC, His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, declaring you don't owe any more taxes. You're good to go, done with the UK. So we start the US side of things. And remember, we're living in the UK, so I could only do things in the US when I was physically present in the US, because often they need a wet signature, but I need to be present there. So we go over, I remember our first Christmas back again, and I had found out at that point I needed this thing called a Medallion Signature Guarantee, which is, think of it as like getting something notarized, but on steroids. It's only financial institutions can do it. It's basically saying this person is real. This person has authority to transfer the asset. Okay. And that their signature is legitimate. And I found out my bank, big American bank, we'd been with them for over 30 years. And they said, we can do it for you. It's a free service, no problem whatsoever. We had about half a dozen financial institutions that needed this medallion. Great. Brought in my loads of paperwork. So I've got the death certificate, the consular report, the marriage certificate. one of them needed like Sophie's birth certificate, passports, everything. Show up there, half a day of them scanning everything and saying, okay, we'll see you in 2 days because it has to go to corporate, who then contact us, and then we can do the medallion. So this is during my 2 weeks of Christmas back in America, where I really would rather be spending time with my family. Rock up back to the bank. Oh, sorry, we can't do it because your probate, your UK probate, has to have been dated within the last 60 days. Like, okay. I said, well, we're leaving, flying back to UK tomorrow. I'll talk to my lawyer in the UK. I'm sure she'll get it sorted. Talk to my lawyer back in the UK. Nope. Probate's issued once. That's the date. They'd have to die all over again for you to get another date on probate. So I said, well, fine. Just write them a letter. It'll make sense. So my wonderful UK solicitor wrote a nice letter. Next time we were back in the US, which was probably another 9 months later, back to my bank. Hey, guys, here we go again. They said, oh, this should be fine. This should be fine. Absolutely. Off they go with all the information. And again, this time got a call, so I didn't have to walk up back to the branch. They said, no, we can't do it. They will not allow it. They will not accept it. It has to be dated within this. They just were so rigid and inflexible. So at that point, I'm starting to pull my hair out, going, well, I can't move these assets. They're still in Scott's name. They have to go for Scott's name to the estate to get to me. And we can't even do the first hurdle because they won't accept this because it's only one probate document. So then started looking into, well, who else can do this medallion? It's only a financial institution. I found a place in the UK who would do it, and I talked to them, and they said, oh, yeah, it doesn't matter. The probate thing, we'll still do it for you for the fee of £350 per medallion. There are at least 6 medallions.
You came in with like this file folder.
And then one of the accounts in particular, it was some shares from a stock that had split. The shares were only worth maybe $200. So it's more the principle of the matter to get them switched over. So I'm not going to spend the equivalent of $500 to release $200. Scott would have been so angry.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to waste our money like that. So I said, well, that's last resort, at least for someone who would do it, but there must be someone else. And this is where my dad was just so wonderful, because I remember crying to him going, I can't, this is so stressful just having this hanging over me. I just want this to be done. He just started asking around everywhere. And it turned out, because again, it's a financial institution who can do these. There was a financial institution that we had a relationship with who said, yes, we will do it. So then they did it. So I finally had the medallions. And then you think, okay, done. Great. No. 2. So that was half a dozen down. So that's 4 now wiped out, or meaning they could transfer everything over. And then 2 remaining financial institutions said, actually, what we really want is your transfer certificate from the IRS. Like, I don't even know what this was. It was Form 5, blah, 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 blah. So I did look up, what is that? That takes 6 to 9 months. And again, loads of paperwork that you have to fill out, and they may or may not issue it. But they did. 6 months later, and everything finally was transferred from Scott to the estate to me 2 years and 11 months after he died.
That's insane.
Yeah.
And I mean, most of these financial institutions won't even talk to you when you're abroad. So you only have that little window of time when you're in the United States to go to the bank, and then they won't tell you what they actually need. So, I mean, how do you feel about the way the institutions work in the United States, and like, what if you could change anything about it, what would you change?
Just if there could be a consistent approach. There were a few of them who I could just do it online. I could just scan everything, PDF, upload, and it was fine. Why did everyone have these different requirements? And the amount of times I would phone up and say, this is what happened. And then, oh, you need this department. And then you get to that department. No, you need this department. And finally, you might get to somebody who is really the department that you need. But it confused everyone. I think the last thing I wrote on your question here was, don't die overseas. It makes everything more complicated.
Wow. We may have a title for the podcast right there.
Yeah.
Were there any other financial or logistical resources that you wish you had? And is there anything you wish was done differently from a planning standpoint, especially given the fact that you were overseas?
Yeah. Although Scott and I were really good about talking to each other, one thing that was difficult was he didn't have all of his beneficiaries up to date. I remember, and I think it was the transfer certificate perhaps, or maybe one of the medallion, where it was a 401k that he was set up at his very first job out of college before we got married. And he just hadn't put a beneficiary on it. And so that just takes forever to just, okay, yes, I'm his wife. And yes, he died overseas. And here's all the paperwork. And yes, we were still married. So it just makes things complicated. Beneficiaries, it's super easy to do. Everything's online now. Just go on. Make sure your beneficiaries are up to date.
Yeah, that's great advice. What about like travel insurance and any other resources that you wish you would have had?
Well, this didn't apply to us because we were living abroad. But for people who are traveling abroad, chances are, if you have the opportunity, if you travel abroad anywhere, you're going to have an amazing time. You're going to have memories. It's going to be fantastic. Have travel insurance, though. And I recommend doing kind of multi-trip or annual travel insurance rather than paying for every trip individually. Just do a blanket coverage. It ends up cheaper. Yeah. Because within those policies, you probably just passed over it. You don't pay any attention because nothing horrible is going to happen on your holiday, but it could. And within those policies, it's quite standard that they have a kind of repatriation of remains is there, accidental death and dismemberment, standard within these policies. Again, just have the policy. It's not just if you lose your luggage or if your connecting flight, you miss it.
Right.
It is for more serious things. If the worst thing should happen, just have that coverage. It is well worth it.
Yeah. No, that's really good advice. How has this experience changed the way you talk or even think about life, money, planning, and legacy for yourself and for your whole family?
We still talk about money. We're very open and honest, and we have very grown-up conversations about it, about how to be respectful with what we have, how to invest it wisely, how to protect it. But at the same time, if there's something you want to do, something that you've just been thinking, you know what, I really want to go hiking in Switzerland. That's really something important to me. Make it happen. It doesn't have to be a ridiculously expensive way of doing it. You can do things in an economical way that you can still have that experience.
100%. Life's worth living.
Exactly. Life is for living, so do it. Live it.
I love it. Were there any questions? Are there any questions you wish you could ask Scott today, having gone through the experience now?
I don't know. I mean, it goes back to, is there anything more I could have done to prevent this from happening? You know, I'm filled with guilt that I didn't recognize that he was unwell and that, yeah. So it's more that, but I think we were as prepared as we could have been for something that was so horrible. I'm just so glad we had our wills, because that has come up so many times in conversations. The first thing any of these financial institutions will ask you, did you have a will? Yes, we did. Here it is. And thankfully it was very straightforward, because it was just me, and when you're married, typically assets just transfer over. So I'm glad about that.
For sure. And still 50% of people, if not more, 50 to 60% still don't have wills today. And it just sucks. Like the first thing that people ask is like, was there a will? And like, let's take those next steps. And if you don't have it, it's just like the Medallion Guarantee. It's really hard to get started.
Absolutely. Yeah. So anything that can make things easier for those you leave behind, even just, having the discussion about what your wishes were. I knew Scott wanted to be cremated. I knew that. We had talked about it. It was in his will. There was no question about that.
And that certainty gives you more peace of mind.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. How else do you honor Scott's legacy today?
We, on his death anniversary, which is terrible, but the 27th of May, we always make a point to do something that we would have done as a family. Typically, that's going hiking or camping. We did go hiking in Switzerland. It's something we wanted to do. So 3 years ago, Sophie and I did a wonderful hiking trip there. And just this past year, this was the 5-year anniversary, and we climbed Mount Monadnock, which is a mountain in southern New Hampshire. And it's a mountain that Scott and I had hiked probably when I was about Sophie's age. So soon after we met. It's one we normally would do. It's just but gosh, it was much harder now at 55 than it was when I was 19.
I don't know. I saw you running around the bases. You're still in good shape.
Oh, thanks.
That's really special, though, the fact that you honor his death anniversary and you do something together with Sophie as a family to that he would have done, like hiking and camping.
Yeah. And it really is about just celebrating the life we had. It's easy to get caught up in their death and how they died, and it was a traumatic thing to witness and to be a part of, but that wasn't our story. Our story was one of love and friendship and adventure and family, and that's what we're trying to do going forward.
That's really special, and you honor him in so many ways, and including experience camps as well, which is really special too.
Yeah, plug for experience camps.
And Sophie volunteers?
Sophie was a camper, so she was able to go that first summer after Scott died, which was just incredible. That we had a dear friend tell us about the camp, and we're just so thankful that we knew about it. And being American, we were able to go even though we lived overseas. So she went to the camp, and then last year she was a leader in training, and this year she will be a counselor.
That's really cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, so it means so much to her. And again, we always say that it's about people who get it.
Mm-hmm. Were there any groups that you had of people who get it that you could that understood you?
Yes, I'm going to plug. It's called WAY, Widowed and Young.
Okay.
So you're young if you were 50 or under when your spouse or partner died. So yes, I was 50, exactly.
You made the cut, unfortunately.
Yeah, made the cut. Woohoo! It's like the worst club to be a member of.
Right.
But it was and is still such an incredible resource. It's throughout the UK, and then they break up into kind of subgroups based on your region. So I would meet up with fellow widowed people in my town, and I now have these friends who are friends for life, and who are you kind of migrate to people who are kind of like you, and so there are other women who are widowed who are around the same age. Most of them have had teenagers too, and we just share so much. Even there's frustrating things like, who the heck do you put down as emergency contact? I remember that being one of the real frustrations, going, I don't know, my emergency contact isn't here anymore. Who's my emergency contact? And we could laugh and talk about those things, which is really, really helpful.
Wow. You don't even think about things like that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Nikki. I'm definitely going to link WAY, Widowed and Young, to the show notes. My final question is more of a deeper one. So, Nikki, I want you to imagine that there's someone listening who just lost their husband and best friend at 50 years old, and they're overseas as well.
Yeah.
Are there any grief mantras or words of wisdom that you would want to tell that person to help them get through what's to come?
You will grow around your grief. It won't shrink. It won't go away, but you will grow and expand your heart around it. It will be a part of you forever, but it won't always hurt the way that it hurts now. And just use all the resources available to you. That's probably where I didn't reach out to people as much as perhaps I could have or should have. But yeah, reach out to those people around you.
That's really important and impactful. I love that. You will grow around your grief because it's always going to be with you. But this experience it makes you grow one way or another. You have to put one foot in front of the other. Yeah. Nikki, thank you so much. This has been an incredible episode.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really glad that I've had that opportunity to talk to you and to share it. I truly do hope that it helps somebody.
I know it will. Thank you so much again. And podcast listeners, thank you so much for being a part of this episode of The Currency of Grief with Nikki Sherman. Don't forget, it's a great day to have a great day. So go have a great day. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Currency of Grief podcast. My hope is that today's conversation brought you clarity, comfort, and even a spark to start those difficult but necessary conversations in your own life. If you found this episode helpful, it would mean the world to me if you would share it with one other person who you feel this podcast could impact. And please, take a moment to leave us a 5-star review. Your review will help us reach more people who need this resource. Remember, the best time to talk about death and money was yesterday. The second best time is now. Until next time, I'm Justin Weidenfeld, your Grief Financial Officer, and this has been the Currency of Grief podcast.